Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Professor Anand Puri, for, I don't see him there, for bringing in the yoga aspect into the conversation. I think it also links very much with Ensouled architecture. So for the next 30, 40 minutes, we will talk about very similar themes and concepts that we've been talking about the last 1 week. Yeah. So yeah, some of the similar themes, but in relationship to the built environment, the architecture. So for those who were here last week, and for those who are familiar with Gebser and Sri Aurobindo's work, this is just going to be a continuation. It's not, some of the themes, they're not new. They're always, they're here. One thing that I wanted to bring in the conversation was what Stefan spoke about, the non-human entities, or the consciousness that are all these fields that are present around us, or the ones that we create, the fields. It's kind of hard, as Sami tells it, but we have a choice as to what field I want to enter or engage with. And I think with that in mind, thinking about an integral architectural consciousness, how do we move forward? That's the some of the questions that I was working with. And a guiding question is, what kind of architectural consciousness do we wish to connect with? So I'll just go to a quick recap of what we spoke last week, only because, you know, sustainability is a very important topic that we cannot, I spoke about this last week on at the Integral Conference of Sri Aurobindo, which was mainly on sustainability. So I can't leave that out when we're talking about integral. So I just wanted to bring in some of the points that I spoke about. We defined sustainability and looked at objective and the subjective aspects. And we saw how a lot of the times, often it's overlooked in sustainability talks, while fully recognizing the diversity of perspectives in both academia and architectural practice. The emphasis here is to bring in an integral approach that can actively contribute to the ongoing development of sustainability paradigm. And sustainability is not just about numbers and green technologies, it's about creating environments that resonate with the soul, the human spirit. And it's about crafting places that are not just physically or environmentally efficient, but also emotionally enriching. Now, we also talked about how sustainability can be viewed as a reflection, as a mirror of integral consciousness or integral architecture. So today we are mainly going to focus on the evolutionary aspects of architecture. So the central point, that central theme that we've been discussing, is that we are co-creators of the spaces we inhabit, and we have the power to shape the world we desire. Now, there's evident energy on the horizon, as you know, we've been talking about, an interplay of distinct forces, and each present in a unique way. Now, this intricate interplay of energies, as I mentioned earlier, offers us a choice of how we can consciously become aware of these forces and actively engage with them effectively. So thinkers and visionaries like Sri Aurobindo, Gebser, Chardin, Jung, they've all left a wealth of knowledge behind for us to learn from or to get guidance from. And probably they have already initiated some form of a field that's like taken place a long time ago. And as these concepts evolve and various energy fields emerge, as we spoke about, as a number of people spoke about today, that independent processing may become overwhelming. So accessing these complex fields requires collaboration and shared understanding. And the thinkers like Gebser, Sri Aurobindo, they've already done the work, they've already done the groundwork. So learning from that. So I'll now just go into the brief points, the key points that support this notion. And because of the time constraints, we might only touch upon these points and only go into one of the topic that I'll go deeper. And these topics are all interconnected. So are these concepts, and we'll focus only on one of them, as I said, which is the evolutionary aspect, and recognizing that it can't be a linear way of looking at these concepts. So many times I might jump back and forth between slides. I'll try my best to be not confusing. And I promise there's some, according to me, there's some powerful images that can keep us engaged. So some of the key points that came up last week was architecture is a reflection of the collective cultural psyche linked to the evolution of consciousness. This is the part we're going to expand on today. Integral thinking requires multidimensional, inclusive, conscious engagement, and it's influenced by thinkers like Sri Aurobindo, Gebser, Jung, Chardin. And architecture is evolving alongside consciousness, impacting design. Soulfulness in design. How can we bring soulfulness in design? Ensouled architecture. Now, looking at designers and ourselves as yogis or spiritual practitioners, bringing in Professor Anant Giri's thing about yoga, bringing yoga into the architectural field. And existing models like Auroville that we discussed last week can provide insights into these concepts. We're not going to go into the details of this in this presentation. And the last one is empowering ourselves to apply these principles within our community. Yeah, and I hope to engage us in a small visualization exercise, maybe at the end. So that's the plan. So the two unique steps in pursuing this inquiry were the evolutionary aspect and the psychology aspect. And now Gebser's 5 stages of evolutionary consciousness were mapped onto and correlated with periods and developments in architectural history. And secondly, Roberto Assagioli, who was the time of Jung and all of these people. I don't go into the detail today about Assagioli, but I have mapped his aspects of the unconscious. He talks about these unconscious, the height psychology, depth psychology, and the middle psychology. I've mapped that onto the styles in architecture that have been developed to see from what place these architects kind of engage in the design process. I'll just pause for a second to just take all that in before we move to the next one. Whew. Okay. So, before I go into this topic, I just wanted to share some personal reflection here that I have worked as an architect for about 21 years in different places of India, Europe, California, now in Maui. And for the longest time, I was depressed. I was depressed in doing architecture. It wasn't the way we learned architecture when we had all these ambitions and we had all these dreams of visions of like, oh, I'll build this and it'll be amazing. It'll change how people feel. And, after a while, it doesn't, reality hits you and you're here in the Bay Area. You have to fight for space. You have to fight for authorities. There's so many things that come and hinder your process of like designing from the soul. And that's when I came here to CIS 10 years ago to like learn about what is whole person psych, what is this consciousness, what is how is architecture related to it, and why am I so deeply pulled into these correlations or these connections. So the basic premise is that architecture is an expression of the evolution of human instincts and externalization of a cultural collective psyche in built form. This instinct becomes increasingly conscious as consciousness evolves. And I contend that our response to it becomes particularly significant at this stage of our development. Now, what is consciousness? Consciousness is everything you experience. It is at its simplest awareness of internal and external existence, our experience of being in the world, self, and everything. Sri Aurobindo says consciousness is a fundamental thing. It is a fundamental thing in existence. It is the energy, the action, the movement of consciousness that creates the universe. And all, I can't see that. And all that is in it. Not only the macrocosm, but the microcosm is nothing but consciousness arranging itself. Gebser goes to write, toward the beginning of this ever-present origin, Gebser he talks about he defines consciousness as a wakeful presence, suggesting it excludes as a contradiction any kind of future-oriented reality. Chardin goes to write, man is nothing else than evolution becoming conscious of itself, and that consciousness of each one of us is evolution looking at itself and reflecting on itself. Now, collective consciousness. We spoke about individual. There's something as individual consciousness and collect. What is collective consciousness? The set of shared beliefs, ideas, morals, attitudes, which operate as a unifying force within society. Now, Sri Aurobindo, Assagioli, Jung explored not only the individual manifestation of conscious force, but also the collective consciousness that could extend the notion of individual consciousness. Now, they write that consciousness is a the collective consciousness evolves more slowly and develops a group mind that takes on a character or force of a group of individuals belonging to a particular city or culture. Now, Carl Jung discovered patterns among cultures and societies and called them archetypes. And as I forget, Dave, Bob, I'm sorry. You spoke about how Jung was trying to make the unconscious conscious and expand the consciousness, as opposed to Gebser, who was like talking about the intensification of consciousness, not as much as like expanding of not caring about this duality of conscious and unconscious, but like it's there. For example, I'm just going to talk out whatever comes out, but for example, if I am in a state, I create, it's my consciousness, I'm like being aware, you are bringing in your awareness and your consciousness, and we together create a bubble that becomes our like our shared consciousness, and that collective like what do we know? There's so many of them right now. There's so many diverse, and that's what Gebser is trying to say. We are moving into this time where individually everybody is going to be like, oh, I have my own aware consciousness, I have my own aware. So, and you have this relational energy fields that builds up. So what energy field do I want to tap into? Or more than tapping into what energy field do I want to engage with and how do I want to engage with in relation to the built environment. And that excites me. Way before Darwin's theory came up, evolution theory, one Herder writes, there exist radical mental differences where it go? Yeah, between historical periods and cultures that people's concepts, beliefs, sensations, and so on differ in deep ways from one period or culture to another. In Ever-Present Origin, Gebser proposes his theory of consciousness with a central thesis that human consciousness undergoes a series of mutations or radical shifts. And at present, we are emerging into what is called the integral consciousness. We've been talking about this for the last 1 week, and I think a lot of people are aware or are know about these concepts. These mutations, which are fundamentally different ways of experiencing reality, are interconnected, such that all preceding consciousness structures are integrated in the subsequent ones. Now, Gebser highlights the witnessing function of consciousness, but attributes an active or directive force to it. This attribution implies that consciousness is not only evolving in response to contact with an experience, but this is the co-initiator of the different mutations or structural changes. So I believe that one of the way to mediate a deeper expression of individual and collective consciousness is through harnessing the power of built environments, the power of architecture. If you want to shape minds, shape spaces in which those minds dwell. But architecture, as it is practiced today, critics contend, assumes autonomy in conflict with the concerns of the collective, with architects self-identifying with their efforts in a one-sided process of hyper-rationalism and egocentrism. Now, how do we bring ourselves as architects, designers, laymen to move beyond this individualistic approach towards awakening of an integral architectural consciousness? Well, this is my yoga. I think this is my work where I have attempted to take part in this evolutionary involvement. And I'm going to take a minute. So just going into Gebser's structure of consciousness, the human consciousness experiences radical shifts known as mutations. We already spoke about that. Now, different ways of, I'm just going to quickly run through these slides. There are a lot of slides, so as I said, I'm jumping between one slide to another. So please let me know if I'm confusing too much. So Gebser's theory identifies 5 stages: archaic, magic, mythic, mental, and integral. And these stages represent evolving levels of human awareness. Evolution is an inverse action of the involution. What is an ultimate last derivation? In the involution is the first to appear in the involution. What was original and primal in the involution is the evolution, the last and the supreme emergence. Now, I think last week we spoke a little bit about Sri Aurobindo's involution and evolution. We can use that as a tool for architects and designers and ourselves as a way to design, a way to bring in or think about, imagine, visualize, active imagining, bring in Jung and others into the plate and say, okay, how do we visualize this later stages, and how the way we can do, the way to evolve that is to go internal. We spoke about that a little bit last week. Again, talking about Sri Aurobindo and Jean Gebser, they talk about that we are at the threshold of evolutionary shift from a mind-centered mental to a soul-centered consciousness. And this movement is from a non-differentiated unity to conscious integration. Now, the collective awareness and participatory action, creative engagement in human evolution, I think this part is like the most essential here. This is to talk about what Gebser spoke in relation to Aurobindo when he realized that he and Aurobindo have been thinking very similarly about this integral consciousness. And just to bring in the context, Gebser, Aurobindo, Jung, and some of the poets and artists, architects, Louis Kahn, many others, F.L. Wright, they probably tapped into some kind of a consciousness that they were seeing, that there is a correlation. Let's start tapping into that. Let's start moving that. And I think that's very interesting. This is a little bit of Sri Aurobindo. I think I'm going to just quickly go through this and not get deeper. Sri Aurobindo defined 5 psychological stages in development of human societies: the symbolic, typal, conventional, individualistic, and subjective. It can be very much related to Gebser's 5 stages. Now, the symbolic stage, according to Sri Aurobindo, is about the spiritual, the imaginative, the intuitive, and the emphasis on sacred architecture. A typal age, fixed social order, less spiritual, focus on psychological and ethical aspects. Conventional, dominated by authorities, rigid religious practices, repressed symbolism. The individual age, that most people believe that we are in right now, the age of reason, encourages freedom of thought and technological growth. And subjective age, that Aurobindo and we're all talking about, that we are drawn to or we want to participate in, emphasis on inner development, seeking deeper truths. I know someone today didn't like the word truths, so I'll say deeper truthfulness and non-rational dimensions. So yeah, he also, the subjective age, as he says, embraces spiritual wisdom and progressing towards integral transformation. Okay, now comparisons with the yugas. Gebser's 5 stages: archaic, magic, mythic, mental, integral. The Puranas had 4 stages, according to the Indian scriptures: the Krita Yoga, Treta Yoga, Dwapara Yuga, not yoga, sorry. Krita Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Kali Yuga. And the belief is that the human understanding progresses from ignorance to profound wisdom. It's very similar to what Gebser talks about. If you match that, the integral stage that we are all talking about. And it's just a little What is Yuga by Vishwanath. Each of these yugas involves stages of change, of evolution, one in which not only the physical universe undergoes change, but the whole thought process and consciousness of mankind metamorphoses, either for better or for worse, depending upon that particular yuga. We are believed to be in the Kali Yuga right now. All right, coming to one of the major topics today that I was excited about. I spent quite a bit of time just finding all the images. So I hope I keep you entertained on this part. So Gebser's structure of consciousness, as we discussed, describe the evolution of consciousness over time. And we can see how these stages correlate with distinct periods of architectural history, revealing the way that architecture has evolved over macro time periods while mirroring collective psychological development, including degrees of consciousness and ways of perceiving the world. Speaks about the archaic. The first of the stages, the archaic, is the primeval. with no sense of dimensionality, no sense of space and time, and full of unfolded potential. It's the earliest form, challenging modern comprehension. It's difficult for us to really bring our consciousness to connect it to the archaic, but it's not hard according to Gebser. And I think we all, as Sami spoke about, we can all remember who we are and access that if uh, it's available, so we can access that whenever we want. So the time frame about 3 to 6 million years ago, 200,000 years ago, first in Gebser's main biographers extends it to about 75,000 years ago. In this state, there's no distinction made between human being and their environment. And this coincides with the pre-architectural time where dwellings were temporary and the basic survival and action was guided largely by instinct. It lacks dimension, space, time awareness, minimal self-awareness, and connection to the surrounding world. It's what Gebser calls it pre-magic, pre-spatial, and pre-temporal, pre-conscious. There's no perspective, no differentiation between self and nature, individual and the universe. They represents a time when early humans lived in a way that was embedded in nature and in their sense of the cosmos. Now, Gebser refers this state to dreamless sleep consciousness, to a time where the soul was dormant and unaware of dreams. In his words, the early period is that period when the soul is still dormant, and its sleep or dormancy may have well been so deep that even though it may have existed, perhaps in a spiritual pre-form, it had not yet attained consciousness. Now, Gebser identified presentiment as the expression. Ooh, I have very less time. So I'll probably quickly run through this. I have 5 more minutes. So I will go on, but I'll try to be as fast. So he talks about the soul being dormant. So it's good to keep that in mind, that the soul was already spoken about. He had spoken about soul as well, just as Jung or Assagioli or Chardin or Sri Aurobindo. It, as I earlier mentioned, it has a profound link to nature, cosmos, lived in small hierarchical groups, lacking architectural evidence in their cave. Now, some of the images that I can show from those times that can be linked to the archaic. All right, so we come to the magic. Magic structure, which follows archaic, develops a sense of self and tribe, space and time, agricultural relationship with place, attributes, powers to the sacred, magical, ritual, and the symbolic. And architectural structures, very important, are mainly for practical uses, such as dwellings. And you see the first Neolithic efforts to satisfy humans' emotional and spiritual needs via symbolism, ritual, and magic. This results in the first early temples, tombs, rock formations, and other religious structures. I'm going to quickly run through these other slides just to finish magic and move on to the next. These are some of the images from the magic that I have correlated. This magic reality as a world of pure but meaningful accident, a world in which all things and persons are interrelated, and not yet centered ego is dispersed over the world of phenomena. Again, some of the images from this period. So what is the relevance of magic consciousness today? So the relevance lies in the focus of the magical aspects of instincts and impulses. Now, Jung has done a lot of work in this regard. He talks about active imagination, uh, um, impulses, instincts, and these can be really helpful for the architects or the designers to connect with how can I bring in that magical aspect in the everyday, in today's life, and how can I channel that today, not denying it, not living, taking it out. The integral has all of these inside it. So taking out magic from it and saying that's from the past might not probably work. And he also talks about the efficient and the deficient aspect. So the deficient aspect can be driven by power and control and can be dangerous to the unconscious nature. I bring in Jung and talking about the active imagination, the magic to mythic, a quick jump. All right, so the magic to mythic consciousness introduces polarity, symmetry, and an orientation towards agriculture and large farming settlements. Architecture, monumental styles become prominent, combining functionality with symbolism. Egyptian temples and pyramids exemplify this transition, emphasizing the cult of the dead and the gods. Egyptian consciousness encompasses both magic and mythic structures, blending abstraction, organic symbolism, massiveness, and structural refinement. This transition leads to the next stage from magic to mythic. So some of the images. Okay, thank you. Apparently I have 5 more minutes. So when we go to the mental, I'm not going to detail about these because of the time constraints. I would have loved to, because I did spend a lot of time on these, but I'll go quick. The transition between what Gebser called mythic to mental marks the awakening of the individual ego and diminishing of the ancient wisdom that had remained in the mythic structure. According to him, the balance within the mythic polarity was split apart with mental dualism. Architectural, Architecturally, examples of this mixture of mental and mythic can be seen in the built structures of Greece, ancient Rome, Northern Europe, and this transition signifies the emergence of the ego and decline in ancient wisdom. Some of the images. Now, I would have spoken a little bit more about these, but I just want to only talk about this particular one. Now, deconstructivism in architecture became big. Uh, it was, you know, expression of the individual architect. I'm not sure, when you map that with Assagioli's structure of consciousness, it feels like it's almost coming, I'm being a little critical here, but it's almost coming from the depth psychology aspect, from the lower unresolved. It's more like a expression of the self as an artist, and not more like what am I thinking in terms of the community, not just about my expression. And I think that's something to think about. I wish I had more time to go into depth of all this. We also talk about the emerging integral consciousness in architecture. There's been a lot of work on this already, as Gebser talks about integral consciousness that has started many, many years ago. And even in architecture, it's about 30, 40 years people have been working. They've been working on making spaces that are more soulful. If I'll write some of the quick architectural designs or creations of the architects that I look up to. Mies van der Rohe, Louis Kahn, one of my favorite architects, Jeffrey Bawa, again, very, very famous architect, Roth Azulik in Mexico. Christopher Alexander talks a lot about pattern language. Not going into that today again. Last week, we went into Aurobindo. We did some learning from Aurobindo and looked at examples, looked at Mathumandir, looked at the other architects who work there and the work that they are putting in, how we can learn from this, take the best out of it, and show up in our individual lives and community, not just as designer and architects, but all of us. How do we tap into the architectural consciousness? It's for everybody. It's for you, me, and yeah, it's for how do I go back home? And my home is an expression of me. It's an extension of me. So how do I want that to look like? If my home or my community is an extension of me, the community believes the built environment, if it's an extension, how does that show in architecture? So some of the architects from around the world, how am I doing on time? Awesome. Then I can probably do a little experiential. Okay. I put Burning Man here. You know, the last week, someone asked about architecture being dynamic. We can't like say there's only one kind of architecture. So it has to be dynamic. What about we make spaces that are moving? I think it was Charles who brought up that question about moving architecture. And I think Burning Man is one of the good examples for that. So I put that here. I think I've been through these last week, so I'm just going to quickly jump into the experiential. One thing that I wanted to talk about is, so we learned that for us to design spaces that are soulful, you have to go inwards and then evolve the architecture to evolve to show. Now, the one way to access that is through the imaginal. And Jung has done so much work in that, active imagine, going into our inner selves to like see what comes out. That can be very helpful. So maybe I'll do that quick exercise, visualization exercise. Would people engage me in that? Is that okay? Okay. Yeah, it's a 5-minute thing. Okay. Let me. Sorry for being so back and forth with slides. There's so much material and I got tempted to show all of it. But I think I'm, well, anyway. So maybe we'll take a minute or two to just drop in and concentrate or just be aware of our breath. Maybe close your eyes if that calls to you. And we did this exercise last week, very short. And today maybe we can drop in a little more. And imagine a community space that maybe you look up to, a community space that you're part of, or community that you aspire to be part of. Picture the built environment of that particular community space and keep that in mind. Go back to your breathing. And now think about, let's together think about or visualize future community built space that we desire or we want to be part of. And maybe we can ask a couple of questions. Who and what does this community serve? What are the characteristics of the built space? The flow of outer space versus inner space within the built space. How are the ecosystems restored, enhanced, and thriving? How is the community space regenerating itself? What is the level of connection, inspiration, and belonging? And how does one move into, out, and around this community space? How does this community space nurture collaboration, creativity, compassion? What is private? What is public? What smells are in the air? What tastes are possible? What now can be heard? How do the surfaces make you feel? What is making everyone safe, heard, and loved? What might or how might we tap into the local wisdom to guide our sustainable initiatives? And what of the future can you sense in the present now? What does it invite you to act on in this present time, in this moment in your life? How can we think beyond participatory? How do I participate? And what is the next step? What do I need to learn to get there? And what is the yoga of this moment? With those questions for reflection, if you take wherever you are with that, maybe you can come back to the present, to the architecture of CIS here. Yeah. Thank you.